if. Hello everyone, I'm Sarah from Everyday Starlet. Welcome to my channel. I make videos to inspire you to be the star of your own life. I'm continuing my masculine feminine energies film breakdown series with one of my favorite films, Clueless. If you're not familiar with what I mean by masculine feminine energies, I talk about this in most of my videos, but a brief summary. Masculine and feminine energies are energies that live within all of us. We all contain both energies, but we all have a core energy that's the one we're most ourselves in. Our core energy often links up with our gender. It doesn't have to, but it very often does. And each of these energies contains archetypes, and we all contain all of the archetypes, and we can tap into them whenever we want to. I have a lot of videos about the masculine and feminine archetypes. And in order to have sexual polarity in a relationship, you need one partner to be in the masculine and one partner to be in the feminine. These opposite energies attract sexually and same energies repel sexually. So Clueless was a film request, and it is one of my favorite films, so I really wanted to do a breakdown of it. I hesitated because I really wanted to focus these breakdowns on films that were more about adults, and since this takes place in high school, I was a little hesitant to talk about things like sexual polarity and things like that. This movie does portray teens as being very adult, which I think is very evident of the time period. This film was out in 1995. This film was also iconic in being a representation of what life was like as a teenager in Beverly Hills, which has kind of taken over the world. I mean, without this film, we probably wouldn't have had the Paris Hilton craze. We probably wouldn't have had the Kardashians now. Whether or not that's a positive or negative thing, that's totally up for you to decide. But yeah, it really did pave the way for a lot of the modern pop culture that we think of now. I was in high school when this film came out. Not gonna lie, I've probably seen it a million times. I probably could recite this entire movie from the start to finish because I know it so well. And fun fact, I actually used to use Cher's speech about the Haitians coming to America as my acting audition speech whenever I needed to do an acting audition when I was younger, so I do know this film start to finish. I've always felt like Clueless was kind of the precursor to Legally Blonde. Legally Blonde always felt to me like Clueless goes to Harvard Law. And because I feel like Cher and Elle Woods have a lot in common. They're very similar characters. And I have a breakdown of Legally Blonde talking about the feminine archetypes. And because Elle Woods was, she was graduating from college, she was going to law school, she was a little bit older, she was representative of more of the divine feminine archetypes. Whereas with Cher, I feel like in this film, she's really stepping into her feminine archetypes. Now, I've talked about this in a lot of other videos, is that masculinity and masculine energy is something that young boys need to be initiated into, whereas most cultures believe that young girls are naturally feminine at their core. And if we were left to our own devices in this society, which we're very often not, we would naturally evolve into being feminine beings. It's not something that we have to learn. And that in reality, it's not about becoming more feminine. It's actually about getting rid of all the things in our way from actually stepping into our natural feminine energy. It's really about releasing and letting go as opposed to actually finding our feminine energy. So because this film really is about Cher, who is a 16-year-old high school student from Beverly Hills, comes from a very wealthy family, has very wealthy friends, and she's very much a slave to modern society, to trends. She's a trendsetter, but somebody actually said to me one time that trendsetters are really just really fast trend followers. You know, I mean, her whole life is really based on a lot of superficiality. But in the same way that I believe that, you know, Elle Woods in Legally Blonde was always a much deeper character than just a surface level pretty girl, Cher is the same way. Cher is actually a much deeper character. She's got a lot more to her. She's not just this, you know, ditz with a credit card, as she calls herself at one point in the film. So throughout this movie, Cher really does feel like she is stepping from some of the wounded feminine archetypes into the healed feminine archetypes. I actually have a whole video talking about the wounded feminine archetypes. That's my Sex and the City breakdown. And then I go into much more detail into the healed feminine archetypes in my Legally Blonde breakdown. But I just want to talk about Cher and some of the feminine archetypes and how Cher seems to step into them. Now, the maiden archetype is pretty obvious. Cher is a classic maiden. She's a wide-eyed young girl, and while I do think she is smarter than she looks, she is somewhat naive about life. You know, she doesn't pick up on the fact that Elton is making moves on her, and she ends up in a situation where he ends up, as she calls it, sexually harassing her. You know, he is being very aggressive with her in a situation where she's very vulnerable. She's trying to set up Elton with her friend Ty and is not picking up on the signs that are pretty obvious that Elton is actually more interested in Cher. She ends up going to the Valley ends up in a parking lot, almost gets robbed. Her maiden energy of this this world that she's in, of this sort of like Beverly Hills, it's kind of a safe little bubble for her, and she's a little bit naive to the things that are going on outside of her world. She talks about not watching the news. That maiden energy is beautiful. Maiden energy is very much that youthful, playful naivete. Cher is so an embodiment of that, but that naivete, when it's not combined with other archetypes like your wise woman, where you tap into your intuition, things like that, can actually get you into trouble. So as this film goes along, Cher actually becomes much more aware of the world, and we'll get into some of those other archetypes, but she does develop her maiden. She keeps her maiden. She's still wide-eyed and playful, even at the end of the film. Of course, she's still 16. Even at the end of the film, you know, and she's catching the bouquet, and she's like, you know, she's having fun and she's playful. She hasn't lost that. Many cultures believe that, you know, the maiden is something that you embody when you're young, and then the minute that you become a mother or step into your mother energy, you let go of the maiden. I'm not really of that thinking. I really do believe that you can embody the maiden throughout your entire life. You can have that youthful, playful energy at any stage in your life, and I think that's a beautiful thing to have. I actually think we should have more of that. The problem is that when you have just the maiden and you don't embody the other archetypes to keep you safe, the maiden can very often lead you through your own naivete into situations that could get you hurt. That's why the maiden energy is so beautiful, but we have to make sure that it's not the only archetype that we're embodying, because that can actually get us into some trouble. The mother archetype. Cher is not what you would typically think of as being the mother archetype, but she very much is. I would say at certain points in the film, she is a little bit of a wounded mother, especially in her relationship with Ty. It's kind of alluded to that, like, because Cher didn't have a mother, because Cher's mother died when she was a baby, that she was kind of acting out this mother instinct on Ty. And it's interesting how Dion says at one point that Cher lives for makeovers because it gives her a sense of control, and that need to control, that controlling mother energy, that tends to come from mother wounding, right? That's a more wounded mother energy as opposed to a divine mother energy. The divine mother energy is her sense of wanting to care for people, and Cher really does have that. She really does want to care for and nurture people. She does want to see Ty have a great time in high school. The problem is that Cher tries to control how Ty experiences high school. So it's when she steps back and lets Ty be more herself, she's stepping into that nurturing energy. She does want to be there and support Dion while Dion's going through all of her drama with her boyfriend Murray. Cher is very much, she's very loving. She cares for her father. Now, that's actually where you start getting into a lot of things with the Gen Xers, which this film is very Gen X. Kind of a little bit hinting at the millennial generation, but this is still a Gen X thing. And a big thing with Gen Xers, which, you know, is, I'm like a young Gen Xer, the idea of having to parent your parents is something I identify with a lot. I have to admit I identified a lot with Cher in this, because Cher's father's a lawyer, my father's a lawyer. I always felt like I had to mother my parents. Cher very much mothers her father. Her father's a good guy, and I'm going to get to him a little bit later on, but Cher really does take care of, she's trying to make sure her father eats right and stays healthy. She keeps track of his appointments. She's kind of like his personal secretary and his daughter and a mother figure. That generation is very much about having to parent your parents, and even in a film like this that's kind of supposed to be a little bit more bubblegum, it's still very prevalent that that's what's going on in this situation. So Cher does have a natural mother instinct. Even at the end when she's talking about Josh and how Josh needs someone to care for him, Cher has this very deep need to want to care for people. It comes out later on in the film when she decides to step in and help out doing charity work. It's that inner need to want to help people and to be that nurturing mother energy. We have to be careful that it doesn't slip into controlling energy, because when it starts to slip into that need to mother someone as opposed to be the divine mother, that's when you start getting into problems. That's when it can start to get into controlling, nagging. That's when it starts to sink into wounded mother energy, and very often into wounded masculine energy. So that's something we want to be mindful of. That warm, nurturing, mothering energy is beautiful to have, and it's wonderful, and not something that I think we should deny or feel guilty about. However, it's important to not step into that that wounded mother energy of feeling a need to control the situation. Or also, wounded mother energy can also be putting your own needs completely aside. And in the same way as the maiden energy, if you only embody the mother energy and you don't tap into any of the other archetypes, you can very easily get used or taken advantage of. Cher's lover energy is interesting. Now, lover energy sometimes gets misunderstood as just being sexual, and it's very clear in the film that Cher is a virgin, as she says. You see how picky I am about my shoes, and they only go on my feet, which is one of my favorite film lines ever. But lover energy tends to be very much about sensuality, about beauty, and Cher is very much about fashion, aesthetic. She's about setting the mood, setting the environment. When she decides that she's going to attempt to lose her virginity to Christian, she's all about setting the mood, setting the environment. She's very into the aesthetics of things. That's very much lover energy, that sensual energy. Very into specific fabrics, designers, things like that, appreciation of beauty. She loves to dance, like all those things. Very much the lover energy. She gets into wounded lover energy in that she's very much obsessive about how much she eats, what she eats. Very evident of the time period. Eating disorders were a big deal in the 90s. This obsession with being waif thin. So that's where she gets into her wounding. She worries about that a little bit less as the film goes on, because she's focused on other things and bigger things. So she's not as focused on, okay, this is what I ate today and I feel so guilty because I ate these things today. Or this obsession with surface appearance. That can often happen with lover energy when it starts to get wounded, as you start to beat yourself up over what you ate specifically, or beat yourself up over how you look, or things like that. And it's really about embodying the sensual pleasures. If you enjoyed eating the piece of candy, then eat the piece of candy. You don't have to eat 20 of them, but you can eat a piece of candy and enjoy it and not beat yourself up and call yourself fat or whatever. Cher's huntress energy is interesting. Her father is known as being this very scary litigator, and Cher knows how to negotiate. She knows how to debate. She's not afraid to go for what she wants, fight for grades that she may not have actually deserved, but she's so good at debating and persuasion that she's able to get the grades that she wants. She's able to get the job done. She's able to fight for what it is that she wants. And it's actually the times when she loses her confidence, or she gets stuck in her head, like when she's doing her driving test, she gets stuck in her head, she's stressed about other things, and that's when she can't actually make it happen. Cher makes things happen. When she wants to make something happen, she goes for it and she makes it happen. It's very much huntress energy. She's not necessarily a fighter per se, as in the idea of you know, fighting somebody for something. She's not that kind of aggression, but she has this, she wants something, she goes for what she wants. She's gonna give a speech, she just goes up and gives a speech. She is really fearless about speaking her mind and speaking her truth, which actually we'll get into the Wild Woman in a second. But now her persuasion is really to get something that she hasn't necessarily earned. So earlier on in the film, when she's doing a lot of this persuasion and this go-getting, she really, if she used that energy in order to actually achieve the things that she wants, she probably would be a lot better off. However, because she does have that drive, that's evident that huntress energy is in her. It's just a matter of knowing to tap into that at the right times, and knowing to tap into that at a genuine time, like for her to actually put the genuine effort into her work, as opposed to just slacking off and then using those powers and that energy and that intelligence in order to get what she wants after the fact. So the huntress energy is there. It's just been a matter of learning how to channel it, which I think is, because huntress energy is actually the most masculine of the feminine archetypes. I do think that that's one that young girls tend to need to develop into as they get stronger, as they get smarter, as they get more accomplished, and as they gain more confidence with themselves in life. Cher's Wild Woman is interesting because Cher will fearlessly speak her truth. She will step in and speak her truth whenever she feels like she needs to. When she gives a speech, she is confident in her speeches. You know, whether it makes sense or whether or not it's the right thing to say, she's confident in speaking her truth. When she decides to take on something, when she has to take on a makeover in the beginning, which is a little bit more superficial, into making somebody into something that she wants, like with Ty, she's making Ty into what she thinks she wants, as opposed to when she takes over for the charity and she kind of makes over the charity, the Pismo Beach disaster relief that she decides to start working towards. She does a makeover of the way that they're organizing that, and it's more genuine. Instead of molding something into what you think it should be, it's taking something that like genuinely needs help and actually using your skills. I mean, the way that she organizes that charity, and she gets people excited about doing the charity work, and she uses her power, popularity, she uses her influence, she uses her organizational skills, that mothering energy to keep things organized. Like, she takes on these causes that are bigger than herself, and she so fearlessly decides to jump in and actually do things that she's passionate about. When she steps into her wild woman is really that moment when she really starts to decide that there's things out there that are greater than herself, and she really wants to start getting involved and fighting for them. That's when Cher really sort of steps into that fearless wild woman within her. Now, the wise woman is probably not something that people would associate with Cher, seeing as though the film is called Clueless. But Cher really isn't clueless. Cher was just somewhat naive in the beginning, and she steps into her wise woman. Now, the wise woman, yes, it's her intelligence, and yes, Cher is actually a lot smarter than she gives herself credit for, or other people give herself credit for. She's just a bit distracted. She doesn't really know how to channel all of her intelligence. And feminine intuition, which is what Cher steps into throughout this film, and at the end is really what she steps into. Feminine intuition is not something that we value in our society as much as we should. We tend to value masculine intelligence, masculine thinking. We don't tend to value that feminine intuition as much, which can be just as powerful, if not more so, than masculine thinking and masculine, you know, that sort of higher education. That feminine intuition is so powerful, and Cher has it. She has it throughout the film, but she doesn't allow herself to fully tap into it. She's in her head a lot, especially when she gets stressed out, like with her driving test, as I mentioned. She gets really stressed out about overthinking things, and that's where she starts to drive really erratically, is when she's like, her mind is somewhere else and she's not present in the moment. She's not as good at reading people as she thinks she is early on in the film. She doesn't pick up on Elton being a sleazeball until it's too late. She doesn't pick up on Christian being obviously not straight in this film. Like, there's things that she just doesn't pick up on because she's a little bit blinded by what she wants, her projections, and her sense of trying to control things. But Cher has a bit of an ego death, actually, in the scene where she is really stressed out. She's had the fight with Ty, and she's failed her driving test, and she's just really stressed out. And the scene where she's walking, it's got like Celine Dion's All By Myself in the background, and she's walking along, and she's like, you know, why am I, she's totally in her head. She's like, why am I stressing about this? Why am I thinking about it? She's literally in this moment where she's like, I'm just completely clueless, and she has this kind of like Dark Night of the Soul, ego death, very similar to the Jerry Maguire film that I broke down, when it was, you know, he just had this ego death of just like hitting rock bottom, everything was going wrong, and then all of a sudden it was this moment of clarity. And of course there's like the fountain behind her, and it's this moment of like, oh my god, I love Josh. I'm in love. Like, that's what's been stressing her this whole time. It's her love of Josh that she hasn't been admitting to herself. And it's that moment of connecting to her intuition. She now knows what it is that she wants. She's found that clarity, and I think it's interesting having the water fountain behind her, which is very much feminine energy. Water, the flow, it's like that flowing feminine intuition that's coming through her, and Cher starts to tap into that aspect of her. I think it's evident that very often, especially in our current society, especially in school and high school and stuff, we push girls into this masculine, like, overthinking everything. Everything has to be thought out, has to be logical. That's not how the feminine mind thinks. The feminine is very much about feeling and intuition, and that's why Cher really steps into that feminine intuition, especially at that point in the scene where it really just kind of starts flowing through her, where she starts to, things start to become more clear to her because she's finally tapped into that feminine intuition. She's still a young girl, she's still 16, she's got a long way to go, but the fact that she was tapping into these things so early and so young is a good sign, and I think the younger that we are when we can start tapping into these things, the better off we'll be in the long run. It's never too early and it's never too late. Cher's queen energy is actually, I would say it's a little bit wounded in a sense of, you know, again, not tapping into her intuition, not really owning her worth. She's essentially going to give herself away to Christian just because she's attracted to him. A lot of the stuff she does to attract Christian is very superficial. It's kind of this putting on a show for him, like, I'm gonna send myself flowers and candy to make myself look worthy, as opposed to just embodying that worthiness within her. But she does have a really great queen energy throughout the entire film, this sense of confidence, this sense of knowing knowing her worth. You know, again, the line about like, you know how picky I am about my shoes and they only go on my feet, right? Like, she's not willing to just jump in bed with any guy. She's not looking for a man to validate her in that sense. The idea that she's willing to get out of the car when Elton is making a move on her. She knows her worth. She's like, nope, this is not what I want. I'm not going to listen to this guy who's pressuring me or trying to sweet talk me or trying to make a move on me. I'm going to own my worth and I'm going to step into my worth. She also embodies her queen energy when the queen energy is really, I believe, the embodiment of all of the archetypes all together, when it all melds together, and then you use that to inspire others, which is really what Cher's doing when she works at the Pismo Beach Disaster Relief Charity. She uses all of these archetypes to really meld together and to really step into her own. And that's when she finds love. You know, that's when she finds the love, and, you know, throughout the film, she's like, oh, I think I really want a boyfriend. I find it really interesting that Cher, you know, she says throughout the film she's not gonna date a high school boy, doesn't want a high school boy. She gets hit on by like the most popular boy in high school who's supposed to be Elton, and she turns him down, and then she falls for Christian. Even though he's a high school boy, she decides to make an exception for him. He ends up being gay. And even though she kept denying that she was interested in Josh, and I don't even think really thought of Josh that way in the beginning of the film, Josh was a college boy. She found herself a college boy. She literally manifested exactly what it was that she wanted in her life just by owning her worth. She didn't chase after a college boy. She wasn't going after someone who was a college boy. In fact, she was running away from the college boy. She was kind of convincing herself she didn't want him. She was even willing to overlook her rule of no high school boys to date Christian, who didn't end up being the right guy for her, but she just believed in what she wanted, and she didn't have to go running after it. It ended up coming to her. She ended up getting everything that she wanted simply because she set the intention and believed in herself along the way. And she worked on herself throughout the film. Some cases she did it because she wanted to impress him, but in other cases she just did it to just become a better person. And even if Josh didn't end up being the right person for her, she was still stepping into her own. When she realized that she liked Josh, she actually said like she couldn't do those things that she did with other boys about like sending herself flowers and candy and trying to pretend that she was something she wasn't. Josh had seen her, you know, when she was just, you know, when she said like grooming herself, and she had this grooming routine. She's just like brushing her hair and doing her hair, and, you know, he'd seen her at any stage. He wasn't somebody she had to put on a show for. He knew her and he fully saw her for her, which is really what the feminine wants. Really deep down, the feminine really just wants to be fully seen. And the fact that Cher found someone who loved her in all of that, in who she really was, not just this persona she was putting on, and she really manifested that. It was exactly what she wanted. She brought that into life throughout the course of just developing herself and working on herself. And I think that that's a really great lesson for women. A lot of women are like, how do I find the right guy? I say honestly, set the intention and then work on becoming the person that the guy that you want is going to want to partner with. Just work on that within yourself. Work on becoming the version of you that you want to be, and the version of you that you want to be in that relationship, and that will call in the man that you want. A few notes about some of the other characters in this film. For one, Cher's father. Cher's father's an interesting character because yes, Cher does have to mother him, which is, I mean, I can identify with that a lot, and I think sometimes that can lead to some problems down the road. And Cher doesn't have a mother figure in her life, which is probably one of the reasons why she struggled somewhat with tapping into her healthy feminine archetypes. Although a lot of us have mothers, some women have great mothers and they still have trouble, so it's not necessarily a, you know, a guarantee. I think it's you know, in this film, Cher is doing pretty well for someone who was raised without a mother, although you do get the impression that Cher's father has been married several times, so she's had several kind of like temporary mothers. Cher's father, even though he is a very strict man and everybody talks about being scared of him and he does want to get argumentative, there's a few scenes where you can really tell, first of all, he's a great disciplinarian. He's very protective of Cher. The way he grills Christian when they're going on their date and stuff, and he's like, I've got a 45 and a shovel, I doubt anyone would miss you. Like, he's definitely protective of his daughter. He knows his daughter's worth and he wants his daughter to own her worth. And it's actually in the scene where Cher goes to her father and tells her father, you know, that she likes this boy and she doesn't think that he likes her. And he's like, well, I don't want you dating a stupid man like that. He's building her up. And it's such a key piece that I think is really missing nowadays. It's something that not a lot of people really think about and understand, that not having father figures, even if the father is present but he's not a loving father. He's not the protector. He's not that masculine protector energy for his daughter, and he doesn't express to his daughter how worthy she is and how important she is. She's gonna seek a man who makes her feel loved, whether he really does or not. It's this idea that if a father doesn't let a daughter know that she is loved, she's gonna start searching for that love in men who don't love her and tell her that she's loved, and she's gonna fall for it because she's so desperate to hear it from someone. And that's why I think it's so important, and why I love the example in this scene of that Cher's father lets her know she's loved and is basically telling her to own your worth, and how he's not comfortable with her settling for some man who doesn't own her worth. And I think that's so, so important. Is that's one of the problems in our society. We lack a lot of healthy father figures, you know, in our world today, is that girls don't grow up with that representation of what a loving father is. And it very often gets young girls into really bad situations and bad relationships and stuff. So, you know, yes, it is important for women, you know, regardless of our father figure situation, to work on ourselves and to work on those things. It's not about blaming your parents, but it's also about, if you're a woman and you're thinking about becoming a parent with someone, like, is this man a man who's going to show the children if they're loved, if they're worthy, and actually teach, especially women, to own their worth and know their worth. You know, I mean, it's such an important thing that I think is missing in our society. So I really do love the scenes where Cher's father really does show that heart and that caring. It's in his own unique way. He's not like a softie, you know what I mean? Like, he's not a, you know, he's a tough, angry guy, but, you know, he does still love his daughter so much, and he wants her to own her worth. And I love that. Actually, a couple notes about Travis in this film, Travis Birkenstock. For one, you know, Ty and Travis obviously have this connection. They have this chemistry together, and I actually, it's a simple kind of throwaway scene. It's supposed to kind of seem like a stoner scene, but I do think it's kind of, it's significant. Where Travis kind of like dives into the crowd at the Val party, and Ty's like, oh my god, that's so cool, I wish girls could do that. And he's like, oh no, don't. Because if girls did it, what would guys do to impress them? And, you know, Ty's like, I don't know, like, stuff. I know it's supposed to be this cute, like, stoner scene, but I do think that it is a little symbolic of the fact that I would never tell a woman to, like, hold herself back from being her full self for a man, ever. I do think, though, that very oftentimes women do so much and keep doing so much and don't allow space for men to do things for them and to do things to possibly impress them. Now, I'm not saying that, look, if you're doing something and you do it really well and some guy does like a half-assed job of something and you're like, I could totally do that better. I'm not saying to like pretend that what he's done is the greatest thing in the world. Like, I'm not talking about any kind of phony stuff. However, if you're constantly like, oh no, I can get that, no, I can do that, no, I can handle this, I can handle that, and you don't ever actually relax and give space for a man to do something to impress you, men are never going to impress you because you're not actually giving them any space for that. So it's not about holding yourself back as a woman and being like, oh, I'm gonna pretend that I don't know how to do things just so that a man will do something for me. It's not about that fake stuff. It's about just saying, okay, I'm gonna relax and not feel like I have to do everything, because I'm gonna leave some space for him to come in and do something. Because then, for one, you also get to find out if he actually is willing to do something for you. Because you probably want to find that out sooner rather than later, as opposed to waiting and getting into a relationship and then realizing that a man really isn't going to do something for you, maybe in a time when you need him to. Leaning back and relaxing and like letting a man do some things for you once in a while is actually really beneficial for you, for the relationship, for learning about the man. So again, it's supposed to be kind of a little throwaway scene, but I just think that it's just an important little reminder that like maybe we as women don't have to do everything. We can let men do some things here and there and, you know, see if they step up and see if they don't. Another important note with Travis that I think is really kind of interesting is, at a certain point in the film, Travis actually admits he's joined a 12-step program, he's quit drugs, he gives his bongs away, and he says in the film, you know, that, you know, he's got this new clarity for his skating, and it's obviously something he's really passionate about. And that's an interesting thing, is that very often when the masculine is using alternative substances, and that doesn't necessarily just have to be drugs, There's other addictive substances out there. You could argue porn, video games, promiscuous sex, things like that, like other things to distract him. Drugs and alcohol are a very popular one. They don't get to gain clarity. That actually distracts the masculine from finding his true purpose. Now, is Travis's true purpose skating? Who knows? I don't know. He's in high school. He doesn't have to know that right away. However, the fact that he's said in this film that he has a new clarity now. Skating may be his true purpose in life, or it might be the guide to his true purpose through skating. Who knows what he's going to achieve. However, he had to give up those addictions, which are really his wounded feminine energy, in order to gain that clarity. And I think that it's just a small scene. It's not even really a significant part of the film, but I just think that it's a little reminder out there that, like, the masculine, when he's in his wounded feminine and is actually distracting himself with any kind of addiction, he's not going to step into his true purpose because he's not going to have that clarity. And the clarity for the masculine is super important. That's also when him and Ty finally come together. Like, they come together in the end because he's now gotten his life together. Like, he's, you know, Ty went on kind of a roundabout way of getting there and kind of becoming something else, and then kind of finding her way back to herself. And then, you know, Travis kind of, you know, he was lost and he ended up finding his way back to himself, and like that's when they really got together. And I think that that's a really important note for this film. Dion and Murray are so cute. I don't know. I love Stacey Dash. I really do. I know she's controversial, but I still love her. They're your typical, like, dramatic couple. I mean, they're in this chaos. They're, you know, I mean, it's young love. Murray hasn't fully stepped into his masculine energy yet. He's still kind of this, like, you know, playful high school boy. And, you know, Dion is kind of like guarded and tough because she's with a guy who's not fully stepped into his masculine energy and stuff. And so, like, they have this drama, you know, they love the attention, they're feeding on the attention. It's, you know, it's a young love for what it is, right? The moment that I really love with the two of them is when Murray is helping Dion learn to drive. And of course, it's a hysterical scene where she accidentally gets on the freeway and everybody's freaking out. And not gonna lie, the first time I got on a highway, it was very similar. Yeah, I identify with that scene a little bit too much. But anyway, Murray does freak out a few times, right? Because Dion is in her, she's terrified. She's terrified of being on the freeway. She's panicking. She you know, she freaks out, like she wants to cover her eyes, and, you know, Murray's like, no, you're gonna hands on the wheel, hands on the wheel. And Murray does freak out, but Murray really does, in that moment, in that scene, shifts into that masculine leadership of he's taking charge. He's telling her what to do, not from a controlling place. It's of a, I want to keep us safe. I want to keep us both safe. And, you know, Dion's in her emotions. She's in her feminine emotions. She's in the chaos of the fear and the everything that's going on. And Murray really does calm her down and really, you know, gets her in that safe space. He stays focused, gets her to breathe when they get to safety, gets her to breathe, calms her down, and, like, they come together. And then, of course, it's implied that the two of them lose their virginity and it becomes this thing. But, like, that's the moment that the sexual polarity happens, because Murray has now stepped into that masculine energy of being that leader, that protector, that direction, that grounded rock, and has been able to handle Dion's feminine chaos. And, like, that's the moment that they come together in sexual polarity. And of course, it's implied that, like, they really do love each other when, you know, nobody's watching. They're very nurturing, caring, and loving to each other. The drama is for show, and it's because they're young, and, you know, hopefully you hope that they'll grow out of that at some point. But it's the moment when they really step into their natural core energies. That's the moment that they really come together. Now, Cher's relationship with Josh really is the central relationship of the movie, and I've talked about that a lot in breaking down Cher and the feminine archetypes. But there's just a few things I want to note. Josh really is, you know, I know he gets represented as kind of being this sort of the 90s nice guy kind of thing. I mean, that's Paul Rudd's shtick, right? He's like the nice guy. However, as much as he's not a tough guy, he's not a super confident macho guy, he's not that kind of, he's not the arrogance that you see from, like, Elton or someone like that. Like, he's not the suave, slick guy that you see in Christian. However, Josh is really quick to step into protector mode. He really does want to protect and keep Cher safe. Now, they have a lot of banter back and forth. They like to kind of criticize each other, which is partly their youth and partly their, you know, their way of distracting each other from their sexual tension type of thing, and, like, not admitting that they actually are attracted to each other. You know, anytime that Cher needs something, Josh is like, I'm right there. I'm there for you. You know, Cher gets stranded in the valley and, you know, she calls Josh because she's safe with Josh, right? Like, as much as she wants to fight it, Josh is her safe space. She still doesn't know at that point that she's really attracted to him at that stage, but he's her safe space, right? So that's why she reaches out to him, and he's willing to do that for her because he wants to keep Cher safe, right? I don't think he fully knows at that point either that he's totally interested in her in that way. He wants to jump to protect her. I mean, that's his protector instinct, which is, you know, not something you see in the quote unquote nice wimpy guy. It's so important for a man to be a protector. Like, that primal urge to be a protector needs to be in a man, because a woman is always going to have that primal urge to want a man who's a protector. There's also in that same scene where Josh ends up bringing his date, who's another college girl, you know, to pick up Cher, and they're talking in the car, and obviously his date is very, you know, kind of this pretentious, know-it-all kind of a person, kind of closed-hearted, kind of has an attitude. Cher actually makes a comment at one point, that's the Hamlet lines, the line I love, where, you know, the date's like, I think I know Hamlet accurately, and Cher's like, well, I remember Mel Gibson accurately. Josh has that moment where he kind of looks at Cher like he's really impressed. Like, he's like, wow, Cher really is smarter than his date, really, you know what I mean? And of course, Josh is a gentleman and walks his date to her door. And then Cher afterwards basically says, like, hey, let's pick up takeout for, you know, my dad and the lawyers because they're up late working and this and that. And like, Josh sees her nurturing energy. Like, he's now seen her be pretty smart and speak up for herself and not back down and actually be quite intelligent. And he's seeing her warm, nurturing energy. Like, Josh is starting to see parts of her that are not just that sort of little girl, maiden, naive girl. He's starting to see her for more of what she actually is. You know, Cher goes on a date with Christian, and Josh is like, oh, I think I should go to the party and keep an eye on her and stuff. Like, he has that drive to protect. And of course, at the end, when one of the lawyers that works for Cher's father starts yelling at Cher and telling her she screwed something up, and Josh is like quick to jump in and protect her and defend her and basically, you know, fight for her. He's willing to stand up for her, you know, which is very much like, I think we get this idea that in order for men to step into their masculine energy, it needs to be this macho kind of thing. And it's not to say that a man can't be macho, but it's also like the fact that, you know, he can be a very nice guy, he can be a very unassuming guy, but if he's willing to step up and protect, then that's still masculine energy. It doesn't have to look one way. It doesn't have to just be, you know, the big guy with the muscles, although, hey, that can be great too. But, you know, it can be a guy who's willing to stand up for a woman. That's when he's tapping into his masculine energy. It's not just about the physical look. Then, of course, is the moment when Cher and Josh come together. Now, Josh has just stepped in to defend her. Cher's upset, Cher's emotional, and then Josh steps into basically, you know, telling her things will be okay, he'll work on it, he'll fix it. That's the masculine. The masculine is willing to do what needs to be done in order to fix the problem. And that's the moment they come together, and I think it's such a great example of the fact that, like, Josh is willing to step into that masculine energy. He's willing to step into the protector. He's willing to fix the problems. He's willing to do what needs to be done. But he also opens his heart and tells her how much he cares about her. And that's that balance. That's that masculine leadership to protect and provide, and also that open-hearted love. Like, that's what the feminine wants. I think we get so caught up in, like, what do women want? Do women want the nice guy, or do they want the bad boy? Do they want this? No, the feminine wants a strong masculine leader who also knows how to open his heart and connect to her. Like, that's what the feminine wants, you know? And I know there's a lot of men who are going to say that that's too much, but in reality, the masculine really wants the feminine to be in all of the feminine archetypes. You know, he wants her to be the warm, nurturing mother, the playful, youthful energy, the wise woman with the intuition, the wild woman who, you know, will just be herself fearlessly, the lover who's connected to her sensuality, that huntress who's willing to fight, the queen who knows her worth. Like, all those things are what the masculine wants. And it's not too much to ask, because it's within all of us. It's just a matter of how much we're willing to do the work to connect to those things, in the same way that the feminine wants a man who is that king energy, who's the warrior, who's also the wise magician, who's also the sensitive lover, like all those things. And that's in all men. It's just a matter of whether or not they're going to tap into them. So it's not so much that anybody's asking for too much. It's just a matter of whether or not we're willing to work on those parts of ourselves that we're not so comfortable with, to let all of us shine through. And I think that that's really an important lesson to learn. And I think despite the fact that this film is called Clueless, there's a lot of really important life lessons that I think we can get from this movie. So I'm really glad this was requested to do as a breakdown, because I was hesitant about doing it because I don't love the idea of this sort of like very adult sexualized representation of high school kids. I do think that, especially the 90s, that started happening a lot, in the 80s too. Some of that is a little bit of Hollywood propaganda, the concept of sort of fetishizing this sort of underage mentality. But the people in this movie were really, they were shown as being adults even though they were technically teenagers. So I was hesitant about breaking down this film, but I really am glad that I did, because I do think there's some really important lessons in here. So yeah, if you haven't seen this movie, I highly, highly recommend it. So after you watch this video, be sure you watch this movie and see if you can pick up on some of the things that I was talking about. I will be doing some film breakdowns, individual film scene breakdowns on my TikTok, and I will try to share them here in shorts on my YouTube throughout the week, as long as YouTube keeps letting me do them. Sometimes they change the copyright rules, and so I don't really know what I can post and what I can't, but I'm going to do my best to share those here. If you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, please give it a big thumbs up and be sure you subscribe to my channel. If you have any other film requests or questions or comments or anything, let me know. Leave a comment in the comment section below. I'd love to hear from you, and I love your suggestions. If you would like to learn the art of feminine communication, be sure to join my masterclass. Details in the description box below, along with links to all my social media accounts. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you join me next time.